Good evening. I am Barrister Tapas Kanti Baul, and you are watching the Persecution Report. Tonight's program addresses a question that many Bangladeshis, regional security experts, and members of the international community are increasingly asking. Is Bangladesh witnessing the return of terrorism and violent extremism after 5th of August 2024? To answer that question, we must begin with history. Between 2001 and 2006, Bangladesh experienced one of the darkest periods in its struggle against terrorism. Militant organizations such as Jamaat al Mujahideen Bangladesh, commonly known as JMB, expanded their networks throughout the country. The world watched in shock on 17 August 2005 when when hundreds of bombs exploded almost simultaneously across 63 districts, demonstrating the operational reach of extremist groups and exposing the vulnerability of the Bangladeshi state. Terrorist attacks targeted judges, cultural institutions, political actors, and ordinary citizens. It is decided in 2018 judgment against Tarek Rahman that state actors in collaborated with terrorist outfits to stage the grenade attack against Awami League on 21 August 2004. During BNP's last term, 10 trucks full of arms and ammunition were seized in Bangladesh, and courts found direct connection between Jamaat, BNP, and terrorist outfits with these incidents. Following the return of the Awami League to power in 2009, Bangladesh adopted what was widely described as a zero tolerance policy towards militancy. Counter-terrorism institutions were strengthened, intelligence coordinated improved, extremist financing networks were disrupted, and security forces conducted sustained operations against militant organizations. Over the following years, Bangladesh became internationally recognized as a country that had significantly weakened organized terrorist networks and prevented the emergence of large scale attacks that once threatened the country's democratic and secular foundations. Then came the dramatic events of July and August 2024. The events of 5th of August 2024 created an unprecedented political transition. During the unrest, prisons were attacked, detainees escaped, and subsequent reports indicated that militant suspects were among those who fled custody. Years later, authorities continue to report that hundreds of escaped inmates remain at large, including individuals linked to extremist cases. Today, new concerns are emerging. Just days ago, the United Nations Security Council's Analytical Support and Sanctions Monitoring Team warned that Al Qaeda in the Indian subcontinent, or AQIS, is attempting to exploit Bangladesh to establish operational cells and expand its logistical and financial networks. The report stated that AQIS has increasingly adopted a decentralized model based on small, dispersed cells, raising concerns among security analysts about recruitment and network building activities inside Bangladesh. These warnings come amid growing concerns about radicalization, extremist mobilization, and the future direction of Bangladesh's security environment. On 5th of August 2026, speaking before an international press event at the Foreign Correspondents Club in New Delhi, Shajib Ajed Joy warned that unless current trends are reversed, the next generation of global terrorists could emerge from Bangladesh. His comments reflected fears that extremist groups may be benefiting politically and from the political instability, weak law enforcement capacity, and the rehabilitation of actors once considered security threats. At the same time, concerns are not limited to terrorism alone. They extend fundamental rights and the safety of vulnerable communities. Last week, a young Bangladesh Hindu Buddhist Council experts recently reported that 257 incidents of communal violence occurred across Bangladesh during the first 6 months of 2026. According to the organization, these incidents included killings, attacks on places of worship, attacks on homes and businesses, land grabbing, threats, and acts of intimidation against religious and ethnic minorities. In recent days, reports have also circulated regarding public threats by extremist elements directed at religious minorities and individuals accused of not adhering to their interpretation of religious practice. For many observers, such incidents raise concerns about the growing confidence of extremist voices in the public sphere. But tonight's discussion is not only about security, it is also about democracy, it is about freedom, and it is about whether countering extremism requires protecting the very rights that extremists seek to destroy. One of the most controversial developments in recent Bangladesh history has been the banning of Awami League politics under anti terrorism legislation. Another has been the arrest and prosecution of journalists, writers, human rights defenders, and civil society figures, including individuals such as Farzana Rupa, Muzammil Babu, and Shahriar Kabir, whose cases have attracted international attention. These developments raise a profound question. When freedom of association is restricted and when freedom of expression comes under pressure, does that create conditions in which extremist forces become stronger rather than weaker? Can a society effectively combat terrorism while narrowing democratic space? Does the suppression of political opposition and independent voices strengthen national security, or does it weaken the democratic resilience that has historically acted as a barrier against extremism? And most importantly, is there a connection between the shrinking civic space in Bangladesh and the growing concerns about militant recruitment, radicalization, and terrorist resurgence? These are difficult questions, they are controversial questions, but they are questions that deserve serious discussion. Tonight, we are honored to be joined by three distinguished guests who bring expertise in international affairs, security studies, and Bangladeshi politics. Paulo Casaca, Executive Director of the South Asia Democratic Forum, Chris Blackburn, Security and Counter-Terrorism Specialist, and Saddam Hossain, President of Bangladesh Chhatra League. Gentlemen, welcome to the prosecution report. Let's begin. So, my first question is to Paulo Casaca. First of all, welcome, Paulo. So, many international observers view political instability as a condition that extremist organizations often exploit. So, my question is to you, Paulo, that from an international perspective, how vulnerable is a country undergoing political transition to extremist infiltration? And are there lessons from South Asia and beyond that Bangladesh should be paying attention to today?
Well, thank you very much, Tapas, for your kind invitation. It's really a pleasure to be here with you, and of course with Chris and Saddam Hussein. Um, I think that there is, after the February elections, there is a perceived stability in the new Bangladesh. The issue is that the new Bangladesh is very much like the one that you described from 2001 to 2006. And, there is not big surprise to see that in the same conditions, the same actions produce the same results. You mentioned one terrorist attack that became famous. I think that it is really the records in terms of simultaneous terrorist actions developed all over the world. I mean, no one ever managed to go as far as this 2006, I think. You just mentioned it, terrorist attack. And this is what we have to expect now. I think that, I mean, we have um, intelligence agencies all over the West, uh, deep state. We have so much investigating communication outlets. And why can't they see what is so obvious? That's really the question to me. What is pushing the West to make this sort of option? Isn't it obvious that it will fall on us? But how and why nothing was learned after September 11? That's absolutely fantastic and very difficult to understand. And to my mind, what we should be doing is to present what is happening in Bangladesh as something very weird, but we should look at ourselves and look at what is going on in the United States, in the United Kingdom, in the whole of the European Union. Uh, how is it that they do not reason on the obvious?
Right. Thank you, Paulo. Now I'll go to Chris. Chris Blackburn, the question to you, before ask the question, let me put a background that Bangladesh faced significant militant threats during the first half of the 2000s, culminating in coordinated attacks across the country. So, Chris, when you examine the terrorist ecosystem that existed in Bangladesh during the early 2000s, what were the warning signs that authorities failed to recognize early enough? You have to unmute, Chris. You have to unmute. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. I think we've got to look at the sort of the historical context of what was happening. Obviously, in the BNP Jamaat government came to power in 2000, but then obviously in 2001 we had the massive terrorist attacks in Washington and New York by Al Qaeda. So we had this backdrop. There was a lot of things going on, obviously with the Taliban and Al Qaeda fighting the Northern Alliance in Afghanistan, and so these attacks brought global attention to Islamic fundamentalism. It had always been sort of a niche problem, but then it became mainstream, obviously, with the horrific attacks on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon. So I think what was happening in Bangladesh is, if we look back, the real sort of nucleus and the real start of the militancy problem in Bangladesh goes back to the period of the Afghan jihad in the 1980s, when intelligence agencies from across the world, and I mean, in the public imagination, especially in the West, we see the sort of the Mujahideen as being this CIA, Saudi, ISI like vehicle, but it wasn't. There was so many NATO countries, the Chinese, Israel, everybody was involved in trying to push the Soviets out of Afghanistan. And Bangladesh did play a role within that. The intelligence agencies sort of let groups and let sort of jihadists and people who'd been sort of in the extremist tank. And at the time, it was mainly the Saudi-led Muslim World League that was instrumental with Jamaat-e-Islami in Pakistan in bringing together all these groups from around the world and the Muslim world to go and fight in Afghanistan and fight the Soviets. So I think Bangladesh is sort of, if we put that as the starting point, what we saw is obviously that after the Soviets then withdrew from Afghanistan, Pakistan and other nations began to use the Mujahideen. They used them in the Balkans. They used them in Indonesia, this Arab mercenary fighting force. Osama bin Laden was just a small part of that. The ISI were the main drivers behind that effort. And so these groups then suddenly they were getting bored. Either as we saw from obviously the WikiLeaks, the Gitmo files, we saw that there's people from all around the Muslim world were basically got their training to be fanatics and terrorists in Afghanistan, but then obviously try to then pull it into the regional and country specific roles. So I think for Bangladesh, what happened was we saw this in the 80s, and then the 90s was a period when these groups were getting sort of spreading their wings in their own countries once they'd come back from Afghanistan. So we saw the HUJB, the Harkatul Jihadi Islami Bangladesh. We saw groups like that starting to organize better. We saw that there was charities and organizations in Bangladesh like the Al Haramain Islamic Foundation and others, which were actually Saudi governments, but Al Qaeda took over a lot of the running in Bangladesh. So we know there was an international sort of network happening. So when 9/11 happened, we saw obviously the rise of Jamaat-e-Islami as a political party. There were groups within GMB and Islami Chhatra Shabir who maybe were getting impatient, and so because I think people forget Maududi and Jamaat-e-Islami. Maududi is a revolutionary, an Islamic revolutionary ideology. Yes, they can be involved in politics and democracy and all the rest of it, but ultimately, those that follow Maududi believe in the overthrow of governments to bring in what they established as the Islamic order. So that is the basics of their ideology. Yes, we know that obviously in Pakistan, Afghanistan, and then even in Bangladesh, that these groups participate in the democratic process, but ultimately they're an anti-democratic force. So I think what we were beginning to see in the early 2000s in Bangladesh, as Jamaat-e-Islami and the BNP took power, were these groups in Bangladesh, GMB and Harkatul Jihad Islami. These groups were getting bigger. They saw what was happening in the rest of the Muslim world. They saw that the sort of the Osama bin Laden ideology of going for these revolutions. They were emboldened by it. So I think in Bangladesh, what we actually saw, and at the time, we've got all the records, and the journalists did a fantastic job. Bangladeshi journalists did a fantastic job, especially in northern Bangladesh, is where they were actually getting people like Bangla Bai were getting patronization by leading figures in the BNP, leading figures within the police, and within the certain aspects of the government. So we know this. We know because the journalists went out and interviewed the superintendents, they interviewed everybody else. So it's a historical record that a lot of extremism in Bangladesh has actually been patronized by elements of the security forces and within the political sphere. So I think if we're looking at the question, is Bangladesh heading for extremism? I think historically we could say yes, there's precedent that we could be. However, I would say that has Tariq Rahman learned his lesson? A lot of people believe he has, and I think that's where we're sort of the flux that is we're experiencing in Bangladesh is the kind of fertile ground where extremists can go for it. They feel that the state is weak. They feel that they've been emboldened. We saw even this January before the elections, we saw GMB members getting acquitted, right? Getting acquitted because they were seen as anti-fascist activists rather than Islamic State or Al Qaeda linked militants. They were seen as anti-Awami League, anti-government activists. Crazy. Now the BNP government is trying to arrest the lot that were acquitted. So as you can see, the this chaos that has been the sort of the revolution, and a lot of people like Muhammad Yunus and the groups were basically saying, oh no, these guys, these effectively militants, extremists and terrorists were pushing the state, therefore their activities were somehow okay. But see, so this normalization by elements of the political elite in Bangladesh is a problem and has continued to be a problem. So I think the recent statements by the Home Minister basically throwing sort of cold water on the United Nations report is unfortunately part of the precedent in Bangladesh. I mean, obviously, we know the history of the BNP Jamaat, but then under even Sheikh Hasina, there's times when the Islamic State were gaining ground and she denied it. So I think there's been a problem in Bangladesh with the communications around these problems. I don't think Bangladesh has a problem on the scale of sort of what Pakistan has, but there's certainly a problem, and I don't think it should be diminished. I think it's quite irresponsible to see people within Bangladesh's political sphere to be diminishing what is a very real and a real challenge for Bangladesh.
Thank you, Chris. You have also answered that there are warning signs reappearing today. And I just want to add one thing with you, that if you follow the trials of International Crimes Tribunal, you will see the officers, the police officers, the RAB officials, and the army officials who participated in several missions against terrorists in Bangladesh, and who actually materialized that zero tolerance policy, they are being tried in the International Crimes Tribunal, saying that they have committed crimes against humanity. And as a result, you will see that within the past week, two militants, one have threatened, said that if you do not pray, like if you do not observe namaz, then you should be killed. And then there is another terrorist, he said in Chittagong that Hindus must be killed. So you see that how the extremism is rising all over. Now my next question is to Saddam Hussein. Saddam, the Bangladesh Chhatra League has consistently maintained that extremism remains an existential threat to Bangladesh's secular identity. So, from your perspective, what role did student organizations play in resisting extremism between 2009 and 2024? And do you believe that role has now become more important from students?
Thank you, Barrister Baul, for inviting me to join this important discussion. It's an honor to be part of a distinguished expert panel with Mr. Casaca and Mr. Blackburn here. I look forward to a constructive and insightful discussion. Bangladesh Chhatra League, the largest progressive political student organization in Bangladesh, is a necessary part of Bangladesh's resistance against extremism. It is not possible to fight extremism with just by courts or police or it's not just a law and order situation. There are political aspects, cultural aspects. Currently, the radical, fundamental extremist groups are gaining political space. Their endorsement from the state machineries, from the political parties, from even the civil society linked with the fundamental groups for these fundamental and extremist groups. And another important aspect of the current situation is the political vacuum. The ban on Bangladesh Awami League and the ban on Bangladesh Students League, the largest students organizations and the largest political party, Bangladesh. This creates a space for the fundamental groups. And what you are mentioning, the role of Bangladesh Student League. Bangladesh Student League is a progressive student organization who believe in secular ideology, democratic. They fight for a democratic, secular, liberal Bangladesh. Bangladesh Students League has the history of language movement for fight against extremism, terrorism, and political struggle against military rulers. And during 2009 to 2024, Bangladesh Students League played vital role in the university campuses so that there is a political or student mobilization for the secular liberal democratic causes. Now, this lacks in Bangladesh, and this is one of the reason of that the gaining the momentum for fundamental and extremism. Currently, you have seen that Islamic Chhatra Shibir, the political student wing of Jamaat Islam, they are operating freely, who believe in a Sharia state, in an Islamic state. They do not believe in the constitutional democracy. They believe in a religion-based states. They are getting a free reign. They are organizing programs, and they have strong linkage with the fundamental groups, and they are doing this openly with the support of all the current political nexus. So the recruitment process for extremism is gaining momentum in Bangladesh. During when under the Awami League government, as a student organization, Bangladesh Student League played that role. We had created a that the ideological space so that the recruitment process could be halted or there can be hindrances. And currently, that lacks in Bangladesh. And that the one of the pipeline for the uh, fundamental groups recruitment is the university campuses, colleges, madrasas. When the largest political organizations cannot mobilize, cannot democratically participate in the political space, the chances of being recruited by the extremist groups, that the chances are getting higher. So that's what is happening in Bangladesh. In the residential halls, in the university campuses, the radical fundamental groups are operating freely. And that the educational institutions or universities, the educational institutions turned to a recruitment center. In the residential halls, the the fundamental political icons. They are openly doing their programs. They are inviting to joining the jihad. They are threatening to the other minority groups. These are the regions and of the current situations. And Bangladesh Students League, they played a vital role in having a counter narrative of this religion based or Islamofascism. Bangladesh Students League has its own legacy, has its own political programs. So, as there is a ban on our organizations, as we cannot move freely, we cannot, we do not have any sort of constitutional, democratic, or any sort of human rights. So we are not, we cannot challenge these extremist fundamental groups as before. Previously, as a students' organizations, Bangladesh Students League also played their role as a public pressure group. When there are incidents of attacks on the minorities or any sort of attacks on the temples, on the shrines, on the monasteries, Bangladesh Students League raised their voices and so that the state can play roles. We make the state responsible for this. We mobilize the people for this greater cause. Currently, all the students' organizations who are linked with BNP, Jamaat, and other political parties and fundamental Islamist groups, they are not raising the voices of the youth. They are actually accelerating the extremist works. So I think these are the regions, and the cultural space in Bangladesh. It is shrinked right now. That the when there is a when the organizations, political or cultural organizations, try to organize concerts or cultural programs, there are threat from the extremist groups that they couldn't do this. And the state always said that the state do not play any role so that the law enforcing agencies can challenge this situation. The state actually says that this is the situation, this is going on for a long time. The day before today, the current home minister, he was saying in Brahmanbaria, the journalist was asking about the concert program was halted by the extremist group. He was saying that this was happening in Brahmanbaria for a long time, and this has become new normal. The journalist shouldn't ask these sort of questions. I think these are the reasons of in the fundamental extremist ecosystem in Bangladesh. And when the current government, the constitutional secularism, these are totally collapsed. These are totally destroyed in current political system in Bangladesh. So the whole situation actually inspired the fundamental groups. And Bangladesh students played that role against extremism, against fundamentalism, against religion-based politics, which is currently totally lacking.
Right. For our listeners and viewers, I would like to add that the moral policing has increased in Bangladesh after 5th of August, without any doubt. Jamaat-e-Islami, their student wing Shibir, and other right-wing political forces with student association of their own, they have continued a moral policing, whether students are maintaining parda or not, whether they are praying or not. This has become a everyday talk of observation that is also fueling the extremist situation. So my next question is to Chris. Chris, a lot of things have changed actually after 5th of August. You have also mentioned that prison attacks and mass prisoner escapes occurred during the political turmoil of August 2024, which I have also mentioned at the beginning. Authorities later confirmed, and right now, a few days ago, the chief of prison authorities, they said that still these people are at large and they are a threat to the safety and security of the country. Now, my question is that from a counter-terrorism perspective, how serious is the situation where militant detainees escape custody during political unrest?
Well, it's a very serious problem because these sort of figures are usually the highest ranking or the people who are in like in the public eye. So for these guys to go aground or to start operational networks again, I think is a massive problem for Bangladeshi authorities. But I would like to think that obviously under Sheikh Hasina and the government of sort of 2006 to 2009, there was a real emphasis on getting the counter-terrorism right in Bangladesh. So hopefully that remains, but it's still a massive problem because yes, these guys might not be trying to create sort of new terror attacks or to go on like sort of sprees, but these guys show that the state itself is unbelievably weak for them to be able to for people to go at will to be then attacking or opening up prisons. It's a massive sort of blow to the state itself because these guys it's all about trying to get monopolies on violence, monopolies on control and ideology. So for these guys to be released by their own sort of comrades and others is extremely worrying. It's an extremely worrying development, and hopefully, I think the Bangladeshi authorities at the minute have done a fantastic job.
Right. I'll just have a quick follow-up question to you. That do you think that these detainees who fled the prison, the terrorists, I mean, do you think that they have contributed to the horrendous events of Bangladesh in July and August?
Yeah, I think there is sort of evidence that these guys were used as a battering ram. That was the reason why the people wanted them out of prison. But I think that for me, the biggest sort of problem has been people who get acquitted for being involved in militancy. I think that's where the state has really failed, and I think obviously before the elections in January, when these GMB guys, actual militants, got acquitted by counter-terrorism officials and judges because they were seen to be against the Awami League. I think that is the biggest danger than people actually being on the loose, because I think there's only I think there's only six or so that are left of the most high profile groups. So yeah, I think that is the problem: the normalization of militancy and extremism in Bangladesh. I think everything went. I think people trying to normalize that behavior of militancy. Um, that was the major problem, rather than people being on the run.
Right. I will come back to Paulo now. That across multiple countries, extremist movements have often attempted to exploit political vacuums. In Bangladesh's case, the political vacuum is more apparent. The interim government imposed a ban on the political activities of Bangladesh under the anti terrorism laws and declared all its associate organizations illegal as terrorist outfits. The control over media and arbitrary detention of journalists and activists for exercising their freedom of expression have narrowed the civic space. So the question is, do you see any connection between the ban, the control of media, and the rise of extremism in Bangladesh?
Absolutely. I mean, these are the two faces of the same coin. There is the persecution of the civil society, the main party that identifies with the creation, with the existence of Bangladesh, uh, the journalists in general, and of course, at the same time, we are seeing the protection, nullification of all the judicial procedures against terrorists, and this is the same, absolutely the same procedure, and I think it is quite obviously coordinated. I do remember, one of the most high profile terrorist murders. I was Abhijit Roy. I was there, in Dhaka at that time. I actually had to go through still the stains of blood of his assassination to get into the university where I was invited to speak the next day. And he had been, in the same place as me. I have not seen him, but he had been in the same place as me at the book fair. And all the people, that had been condemned by his death were released, of course. They're treated like heroes. I'm sorry, but we cannot continue to pretend to not to see what is so obvious that everyone can see. If you want to see, of course. I would say that the issue Maududi that was very very well brought to the discussion by Chris. I mean, I think Maududi is the most important modern jihadist thinker from the global and revolutionary point of view. His manifest jihad. He later made a book 4 years after. Forget about the book. Look at the manifest. The manifest is absolutely loud and clear, more loud and clear than whatever has been produced by the Muslim Brotherhood, by the way. And this agenda is there. But well, for a century. It has been there for a century. But, Western leaders don't want to see it. Chris spoke about the Soviet Union and Afghanistan. Well, but it was the same thing, after the Second World War, where you want, oh no, they want to go to the warm sea, so we have to make a wall to India. So Pakistan was created for this wall. Nepal made part of it because Nepal was supposed to be a bit of a creation of the United Kingdom. And then there were some Himalayan mountains, no problem. I mean, this was a preposterous idea already at the time. Absolutely nonsensical at the time. The much I can praise Mr. Churchill for a lot of things. For this, I certainly don't. I think it was a complete disaster. But was this an exception? I mean, look at 71. You see this person that is still glorified as the greatest diplomat, Mr. Kissinger. I'm sorry, I think his works tell a lot. I mean, there is not a single diplomatic strategy pursued that was not a disaster for the United States. Well, okay, but Kissinger, you see the same thing, the defense of a genocide for some absolutely incomprehensible geopolitical reasoning. And the same continues with, before and after September 11. I mean, Bin Laden was brought with the blessing of the United States to Afghanistan in 96. No one could see what was going to happen. I mean, it's unbelievable how such blindness can be widespread in the West. It's absolutely unbelievable. Bangladesh is to me the most obvious thing I've ever seen in my life. I mean, you have a government that, of course, it's not perfect. It's completely, senseless to try to find the perfect government. It doesn't exist. Most of the problems I see with Sheikh Hasina was she appeased. I mean, I'm not saying that she should not have appeased, because the consequences, I don't know if they would be good, but she appeased the military establishment and the Islamic establishment. Appeased, I mean, she did not allow them to make open terrorism. I mean, she denied the presence of the Islamic State. I'm sorry, but I saw this everywhere in the world. Mozambique, for instance, they've been denying this for ages, although they were there for decades before they acknowledged. And this has been, I mean, no one claims loudly, oh, we have the Islamic State in our borders. Doesn't look very good. But this is a superficial thing. It has nothing to do with the nurturing of terrorists in Bangladesh. And, of course, Tariq Rahman. I mean, he was condemned in 2018 for terrorism. How comes that the United Kingdom always saw him as a very nice guy? He was to be protected, and now the international community, oh, fantastic prime minister. The same United Kingdom that refused to give asylum to Sheikh Hasina, by the way. How comes? Oh, the court in 2018 was not independent. Come on. And what about the hundreds of thousands of completely ludicrous accusations against Bangladeshis that are being used against them? Yes, they are being used. I saw this in the European Parliament. That an official told me, well, here, the think tank of the European Parliament, they are putting the accusations of this ICT as a description of the people of the Awami League. I mean, we have to stop this. We in the West, because our dear Bangladeshi friends are really suffering from this completely blindness we are of our policy. Our policy has not been rational. What is driving it? Well, it's a big question mark. I have some clues on it, but I would not want to go on the issue. The issue is it makes no sense. We must stop protecting terrorists. It is bad from the moral point of view. It is terrible for Bangladeshis, but it will come into us. It's absolutely certain, sooner or later. So we have to change policy better rapidly than with a long time of difference.
I have a quick follow-up question to you, Paulo. That do you believe Bangladesh is experiencing a temporary period of instability, or do you see the risk of a more structural extremist resurgence?
No, I think that it is, the problem in Bangladesh or in Pakistan, for instance, is that the military or the state apparatus does not control the terrorist movements that it allows to grow. This has been like that, for much longer time in Pakistan and in Bangladesh. So this instability is inherent to the system. But the system in itself works very much, very well, works and proves to be resilient over time. Um, you can look at Pakistan and you see it. The all of the dozens and dozens of terrorist groups that, well, Bin Laden is obviously the most famous, but it's not an exception; it's the rule. And what comes out of it, of course, from a lot of times these groups turn against the state, and it is a bit like Hillary Clinton said. You are cultivating a garden of vipers, and then you you are surprised that they bite you. Okay, but this is a very it does not correspond to the nominal Western concepts of stability and instability. It is a stability made of instability, if you want.
Right. Now, the question to Saddam, that it has been repeatedly been criticized and alleged that extremist and ultra-conservative political actors have gained greater public legitimacy after 2024, especially 5th of August. So many supporters of the previous government argue that extremist political forces have become more visible in the public sphere. I mean, what I'm saying is that it is from the Army League perspective, it is always being alleged that they are getting more visibility in the public sphere, the terrorists. What evidence do you believe supports that concern that they are having more visibility in the public sphere?
They are obviously more visible. Not only
Saddam,
this,
could you right? Please continue. Yeah.
there is obviously more visibility, and you can say that that the extreme political forces become more visible. It becomes new normal in Bangladesh, and this is not just a coincidence. It is actually the policy outcome of the July August event, the interim government's policy, and the current BNP regime's decisions. This is actually a policy outcome of the situation, and I think the chains of events of political leadership by the events of July August, it is the result is not just the change of political leadership. It also creates political vacuum. It also gave more organizational space, state apparatus supports for these extremist groups. And we have seen that Hizbut Tahrir, they staged processions all over the country, and they openly called for caliphate. So the activities of the radical groups are intensified, and they are unchallenged. There is no fear of consequences currently. So they are doing whatever they like. They are campaigning for the extremist ideology. They are training programs. There are there are communication between the international terrorist organizations and the local uh, Islamist terrorist organizations. And our esteemed guests already mentioned the jailbreaking events, the bail of the convicted criminals. So they are now reconnected, they are now regrouped, and they are doing their jobs. And we have also watched the result, the continuous attacks on the minorities. According to the reports of Hindu, Buddha, Christians Unity Council, there are more than 3,000 events of the communal attacks, and attacks on the temples, attack on the Sufi shrines, and minorities became, we can say, a second-class citizen. There is no safety for the Hindus, for the Buddhists, for the Christians, for the indigenous people in Bangladesh, just for being not Muslim. That your life can be finished within a point of time. Your property can be seized. Your job can be taken. You have no cultural space. So it is that from the current situation, it is clear that the fundamental and extremist groups they are dominating the political cultural space in current Bangladesh.
Tapas. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, we have a problem, technical problem with Tapas, I suppose. The internet is
Yes,
okay. It's coming back.
sorry for a sudden network problem. I hope, Saddam, you finished answering the question, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so now I will come back to Paulo one more time. Paulo, South Asia Democratic Forum has consistently focused on human rights, minority protection, and democratic resilience. Saddam was also talking about the impact of this rise of extremism in Bangladesh on the minorities. So, my question to you, Paulo, is that historically, extremist movements have often targeted minorities first. What indicators should minority communities monitor when evaluating whether terrorism or extremism is growing, especially in the case of Bangladesh? Paulo, please.
I just saw in Twitter the portrait of an Hindu family of four, a couple and two kids, whose remains were founded. And I mean, it is so painstaking, this sort of thing. I witnessed very closely a situation that I thought was a lot to do with it, which was Iraq. Iraq was also supposed to be liberated. I mean, in the case of Iraq, no question, there was a dictatorship, a terrible dictatorship. No comparison with Sheikh Hasina's democracy that might have had its limits, but nothing to do with Saddam Hussein. And I saw the first thing were the minorities. The very first thing were the minorities. And I remembered when I was, in 2001, one of the times I was out of Dhaka, in the Chittagong hill tracks, and seeing the communities, the village, the Muslim, the Hindu, the Buddhist, and I was told, "Oh yes, it's going to be no, no." I said, "I'm afraid that you just made a small fire, and it's going to be a disaster." And I was, "Oh no, never! It will never happen." I said, "Yeah, I saw this sort of thing in Iraq where people said never. I saw, towns of Sunnis and Shias where everybody was happy along. Actually, some of them did not even know that they were Sunnis and the others were Shias. And just in some months, complete ethnic cleansing. Not a single person could be out of its community. So the logic of fanaticism is absolutely terrible. The best indicator is exactly the discourse. What do you hear? What is it being propagated? And the internet is full of it. Red alerts should have been, flagging for years. Regarding Bangladesh. And why does the West not care? I mean, he did not care in Iraq either. I was there. I was a member of the parliament at the time. I did everything I could, to make these dramas heard. Nobody would want to listen. And this is the problem. I repeat, this is the problem. I mean, the West that does not understand what it is dealing with, or does not want to understand, is a West that is failing, of course, its solidarity duties, but it is failing its duties to its future.
Right. Now, Chris, back in 2001 and 2006, the terrorist outfits attacked minorities regularly. And at the time, the US recognized Bangladesh as a breeding ground for future terrorists. For this reason, they assisted in and aided in the creation of RAB, Rapid Action Battalion. Now, the UN Security Council and Sajib Wajed Joy have also raised the same concern. Do you think that present Bangladesh could be a security threat to the minorities within Bangladesh and to the Western world?
Well, I think we've already seen that. Obviously, there's groups who study these things and document attacks on minorities, and unfortunately, what we see is, and we see it around the world, extremists go for the vulnerable, they go for the minority communities, because they see them as easy targets. It gives them a sense of empowerment, and it's evil at the end of the day. And so I think you're right. Could Bangladesh, and have we seen major attacks on minorities? Yes, we have. But is it from terrorists? I would argue it hasn't been from terrorists. It's actually been from sections of the political establishment with loose words. Or, I mean, after the uprising, we did see a lot of stuff on even Twitter in English language. People were saying, "Oh, there was the raw agents were out there, Hindus are out there acting as raw agents, and all this kind of nonsense." But what you see on the ground is, yes, it's happening on social media, but on the ground you're seeing physical attacks on people, of communities getting made as scapegoats or mistrusted. And I think that comes from the political system, not so much as a. Obviously, we've seen terrorists attack sort of secular bloggers and people who were wanted human rights and gay rights and that kind of. We saw that during 2006. We saw that in Bangladesh. But at the minute, I think it's the political establishment itself that I think is going wrong. And we're seeing people from the NCP, and we're seeing people from Jamaat who's basically are saying, listen, we're going to get back to the streets. If you don't do what we want, there's going to be blood on the streets again. So I think it's the language of the political class, I think, is very irresponsible. And then that's when you will see terrorist groups and the real extremists be emboldened by that, because you need in a political system to be responsible. And I think turning the sort of anti-terrorism against the Awami League is probably one of the biggest mistakes they could ever make. this present government. And I think they need to dilute that language, because it's basically putting people, like, yes, we know that the Awami League made mistakes, right? But the BNP Jamaat, if you go back and read the Human Rights, Amnesty International, and all the other groups, like the international crisis groups, they were saying they were doing the exact same thing, right? So it's like, is there a problem with Bangladesh's politics where the parties do go to war? That sometimes, and I know Saddam Hussein's here, the politics of student politics in Bangladesh for the last 20, 30 years has been about who can be the biggest sort of muscle on campus. Not that we're pushing our political program. It's who's got the muscle. And I think Bangladesh need to get to a place where everybody, and there's a plague on everyone's house. I'll borrow a line from William Shakespeare. There's been a problem in Bangladesh, and I've been advocating there needs to be reconciliation. The 1971 tribunals weren't perfect, but I think justice was done. It was a big step, and I think whoever came to power, whether it was the Awami League or anybody else, that needed to happen for Bangladesh to be able to look at its own citizens and say the horrors of 1971 shall never be repeated, and we are going to look for justice. And I think that was a massive move for Bangladesh. But what we've seen is, and since the uprising, is this was always seen as a counter-revolution to that, the anti-Shabagis. I think that's what a lot of the activists were using that term. So I think Bangladesh is in a state of massive flux and chaos. Now, I'd like to think that the BNP government have learned lessons. And I think dismissing the United Nations report about the problems of potential Al-Qaeda involvement, but there's other problems, as we know, in Bangladesh. So I think the whole sort of holistic approach would be they need to just calm the tensions, and I do think there does need to be a lot of reconciliation in Bangladesh, and nobody's being perfect. And I think the minorities are the ones who always suffer, whether it's from terrorists or from the extremism coming out of the political system. And I think that's what we need to address.
Right. Saddam, I know you are in touch with your activists and secular activists on the ground. So, what are you hearing directly from minority communities regarding their safety, and what policies would you advocate to address these concerns?
You know that attacks on the minorities, repression against the minorities, this is the everyday events in Bangladesh. And from my perspective, it is not just a community problem; it is a national failure. And some people are saying that by saying this, we are doing favor to the minorities. But this is not about favoring someone, but it is the test of being democratic, test of being plural, test of being having a society, having a rights-based society. And whenever I had the chance of talking with the minority groups, leaders, activists, or just fellow citizens, it comes to me like that the fear has become a daily reality for the minority people in Bangladesh. There are feelings of insecurity. There is a feeling of hopelessness. There is a feeling of not being a actual citizen, and their property, their livelihood is totally in insecurity. There are targeted attacks on the temples. There are events of sexual violences. There are events of vulnerability of the minority women's, and that there are and the state is in the current government or the state apparatus is not solving the problem. The wrongdoers who are involved in these communal violences, they are always getting a free pass. They are always getting impunity. There is always selective justice whenever there are concerns about arresting the wrongdoers, arresting the who were involved in the communal violences. That the state just become muted. They do not do any sort of proactive things. So I think this scenario should be changed totally. And when there is a lack of competitive democracy, when the uh, largest political party is banned, I think this is one of the main reason of of the communal violence, of attacks on the minorities. So I think we should look forward. We should face the challenges. We shouldn't skip this. We first for solving a problem, you first have to confess that there is problem there. And I think the state, the government, all the political parties, whatever their political beliefs, whatever their ideology is, that the zero tolerance against terrorism, zero tolerance against extremism is must be maintained in our in Bangladesh, in the government system, in the political structure. And I think that is that is not sufficient. We have also take some sort of other steps, like that we have create state mechanism for minority protection center. There is no such things in our state apparatus, in our state machineries, so that we can respond, so that we can solve the problems. And the property or land rights enforcement, there are lackings in our laws, in our system. So property and land rights must be fully enforced, and the protection of the place of worship and justice and witness protection. Because whenever these things happens, and when the justice process was going on, the witness, there are fear, there are a environment of fear, there are threat of life to them. So I think the government should be responsible for the justice and witness protection. And as a government, as a state, we have also played the role so that we can have containment of the radical forces. And another, maybe it is a political thing, but I think the uh, constitutional secularism is must be restored in our politics. The pluralist character of our constitution, of our country, it is must be restored. That no political party, no group should say something like that, which is actually supporting a religion based state. There shouldn't be like this, that you are prioritizing some religion, you are prioritizing some citizens over others. This should be totally stopped. This is against rights. This is against natural justice. This is against the idea of a citizen based state. So I think this broader political consensus should be maintained. And there must be a political responsibility, high political accountability. When the events were happening during the previous Yunus regime, there were attacks on the minorities, there were repression against the minorities, and the then interim government chief was saying that this was happening just because they were the supporters of Awami League. So this is actually kind of encouragement for this sort of event. This is kind of endorsement for this sort of communal violence. So I think when there are events of communal violence, when there are events of repression, when there are events of attacks on the place of worships, the political persons, whoever is in power, they must be responsible. They must be held responsible, which is currently lacked in Bangladesh.
Thank you, Saddam. I will just say that because of this support from Yunus, Dipu Dash was burned alive. There is a school children named Ridoy. We don't know where he is right now, but he was lynched, even in the police station, and nobody was punished or accountable for those incidents till today. Now, I will start the final segment with Chris. Uh, Counterterrorism experts often emphasize that successful strategies combine security, intelligence, and community engagement. International organizations and foreign partners are crucial in controlling the rise of extremism in a country like Bangladesh. But after 5th of August 2024, we are seeing that both international organizations, such as the UN Human Rights Commission, the European Union, Amnesty, Human Rights Watch, etc., and foreign partners like the USA, UK, etc., are completely silent about this. In many cases, media reported that they are meeting with those within Bangladesh who has terrorist connections. Now, my question to you, Chris, is that why do you think they are silent, and what should be done so that they act upon these facts and figures?
Well, I think it's a little bit unfair to say they've been silent because a lot of a lot of this sort of organisations and mechanisms have raised their voices about the minorities who were under sort of assault after the uprising, and especially the BBC sent out reporters. So the BBC have been accused of turning a blind eye, and they simply didn't. But I think a lot of the reasons why people haven't been forthcoming or assertive on some of these issues is that they don't know what the future holds in Bangladesh. They've got those anxieties, but they are monitoring what's happening. But I think obviously it's a difficult situation because obviously when they put the record of Sheikh Hasina and some of the things that happened, um, like the killing of civilian protesters and things like that, they've got to deal with it. Yes, we know that there's a lot of those guys were militants. A lot of them were people who were deliberately targeting state institutions, and the state as a state institution, they've got to respond. But those killings happened. We can't brush it under the carpet. And I think that's what Bangladesh needs. It needs people who can at least be more assertive about the problems that are there. And I think that's why the Home Minister's saying that, oh, we shouldn't really look into the United Nations report about Al Qaeda in Bangladesh. I think that's disappointing to say the least. And I think that shows that the BNP perhaps haven't learned lessons because they used to deny everything that was happening when they were last in power, when Bangladesh was meeting with their ministers and being given sort of royal treatment up in the north of Bangladesh. So I think yeah, it's a tricky situation. I would like to see them to be more objective on Bangladesh, to be more sort of analytical rather than sort of just. And I mean, with the things that were happening under Mohammed Yunus, it was disgusting watching how some of the responses were, and I think the sort of the reporting by the BBC and others really did sort of say, no, this is exactly what's happening, and you're basically not putting enough pressure on the Yunus regime to sort the problem out. But I do think that the looking from their perspective, I think they had a difficult job. But I would like to see them do more and to be more assertive especially when it comes to minority rights and the sort of the dismissing of the UN report. I think is quite dangerous in my opinion.
Right. And the second last question is to Paulo, that international cooperation has become increasingly important in combating terrorist financing and transnational extremist networks. Paulo, what role can democratic partners and international institutions play in helping Bangladesh prevent radicalization and terrorism?
Well, to start with, they should abide by the truth, to have fair, reasonable, and proportional approaches to situations. To say that Sheikh Hasina can be compared with Yunus because there were live bullets against demonstrators before the 5th of August, I really think makes no sense whatsoever. This live bullet, this episode is obviously something that cannot be tolerated, and whoever did it should be investigated to the very end. But to forget that thousands of policemen were lynched, that the organizers, so-called students, they already confessed that they were aiming at a, a rebellion to grab the state, that they used all sorts of violent tactics. I mean, the report of Walter Turk is perhaps the most shameful thing I've seen in my life. And I know Mr. Walter Turk. I actually worked with him on a lot of things regarding Iraq, and I couldn't imagine that he would do a thing like that. And besides that, I mean, to be so, he seems not to be even conscious of the conflicts of interest of what he did, because he was showing up, being a big Paul with Yunus, which is actually the main person that should be under investigation, at the same time that he claimed to be sharing a research that was objective on a period where Mr. Yunus was the main responsible. It's absolutely, I have never seen nothing like that in my life, because it was not only the fact that it was not objective, it was a piece of propaganda, but especially that he really wouldn't care. I mean, he left traces everywhere that he was doing a piece of propaganda. So we have a tremendous problem with this West. I mean, the BBC. Well, when they were giving a news on Sheikh Hasina press conference, the first line, I mean, I just saw the first lines, uh, condemned by the court for crimes against humanity. What's court? ICT. I mean, it's a joke. Is this objective? I mean, this is propaganda. I'm sorry. I have seen more objective approaches from the Soviet Union that I'm seeing from the BBC and other establishment. And this is a tremendous problem. I mean, I have personally, what do I have to do with it? I mean, Bangladesh came to me as, if you want, by chance. Of course, I remember it from child, but I do understand that if we accept this sort of joke to be justice, we are going to be the next victims. That's what people in the West should understand. So this is absolutely outrageous to see the way that this international community that just washed Tariq Rahman condemnation. And of course, I've not been. I mean, I do accept that any court decision should be under revision. I am not against it. Um, uh, the moment that somebody wants to see and say, well, let's look at 2018, let's look at the independence of court, of course, that whoever does that should be doing the same thing on the present ICT and on Sharia Kabir, for instance, the Sharia Kabir condemnation, and so many others. And so the hundreds of thousands of completely bogus accusations. So we cannot put everything at the same level. No. There are errors from many sides. There are things that have not been done as they should have been done. But we cannot make say that, oh, this is okay, everything made mistakes. No, I'm sorry. This is not fair. I do not agree with it. I think things should be seen as they should be seen. And this report, I mean, there were several conferences. I remember the foreign affairs minister of Bangladesh. He made, in Geneva, he made a declaration around a quarter of an hour explaining how he was interviewed, how he described how his house was burned, everybody was persecuted. I mean, everything, lots of crimes he described. Well, there was not a single comma about this on the report. Zero. This was a complete pamphlet. And it's not acceptable. It's simply not acceptable. And I am sorry, but we need to have real human rights organizations. Human rights organizations that are not on the payroll of nobody, but have principles. We need them. Without them, we are going to suffer every time more from this sort of affairs.
Thank you, Paulo. The last question is to Saddam. Young people remain the primary target audience for extremist recruiters. And Bangladeshi young people are now very in a vulnerable situation right now. So, what message would you send to the next generation of Bangladeshis regarding secularism pluralism, and resistance to extremism.
Uh, Radical forces have become more visible again in Bangladesh. Bombs have reappeared. There are continuous attacks on the minorities. So it is a breeding ground for fundamental and extremist groups in the current context. And our young generation should wake up and smell the coffee of the current situation. And our young generation should say that they will not accept this as a new normal. Our generation will decide what kind of country will become. And whatever our political beliefs is, in which political party we are linked, in which political parties we liked or disliked, whatever our thinking pattern or ideologies are, I think we should have a common consensus to have a democratic, secular, progressive, modern, rights-based country. And that's why I think we should have that spirit. And we also think we also should focus on secularism and progressive policies. The young generation shouldn't think that the secularism is a foreign thinking or is a foreign word. It is the promise of our liberation war. It is the promise of 1971. It is the promise of our generation. It is integral part of democracy and fundamental rights. So I hope that, and if we remain quiet, if we remain silent, I think this will accelerate the fundamental and extremist political equation. So uh, we should raise our voice, and I think the voice of our young generation, the presence of our young generation, this is the first line of resistance against extremism. And we should politically challenge this fundamental political ideologues. We should create more cultural space, and we should be focused for competitive democracy. We should raise our voice for democratic environment, so that the organizational space for the fundamental groups can be shrinked. And I think this can play a role for a hopeful future, for a future our generation dreamed of. And the courage of our generation, the questions of our generations, the steps taken by our generation will decide the future of Bangladesh. The future of Bangladesh will be written by the courage of this generation. So I think I believe our generation, they are the ambassador of hope, they are the ambassador of democracy, they are the ambassador of secularism, they are the ambassador of the future. And they will create their history, they will write their history, and they will shape Bangladesh in a modern, pluralistic way.
Thank you, everyone. So, thank you to our distinguished guests, Paulo Casaca, Chris Blackburn, and Saddam Hussein. Tonight's discussion reminds us that terrorism is not merely a security issue. It is a challenge to democracy, pluralism, religious freedom, and the rule of law. Whether one believes the threat is growing, declining, or being exaggerated, one point remains clear: vigilance is essential. Bangladesh's history demonstrates both the devastating consequences of extremism and the ability of society and institutions to resist it. The future of Bangladesh must belong neither to terrorists nor to those who seek to divide society through fear. It must belong to the principles of democracy, human dignity, secularism, accountability, and peaceful coexistence. I am Barrister Tapas Kanti Baul. Thank you for joining us on the Persecution Report. Good night.